the early hours of 1820, devastating flames consumed the spiritual heart of Cork. The flames devoured decades of faith built in secret, reducing the dreams of an entire community to ashes. But out of this tragedy, something even more extraordinary was born. This is the story of the cathedral that defied empires, survived the fire, and carries in its stones the deepest secrets of Irish resistance. A church that was built underground, destroyed by mysterious forces, and reborn from the ashes under the vision of one of the greatest architects of the 19th century. Welcome to Sacred Roots. I am the voice that will guide you through the most fascinating stories of the world's churches. Today, we're going to unravel the mysteries of the Cathedral of St. Mary and St. Anne in Cork, Ireland. The Cathedral of St. Mary and St. Anne stands majestically in Shandon, a neighbourhood whose name carries ancient meanings. Shandon comes from Sean Dun, which means Old Fort in Irish Gaelic, revealing that this place has been sacred since medieval times. Known to locals as the North Cathedral, its imposing red and white stone tower stands out in the Cork skyline, especially when lit up on Irish nights. But don't let the apparent tranquility fool you. This cathedral holds secrets that go far beyond its architectural beauty. As the seat of the Diocese of Cork and Ross, it is not just a temple. It is a living symbol of the spiritual and cultural resistance of the Irish people. And to understand why it is so special, we must go back in time to one of the darkest periods in Ireland's history. Between 1695 and 1829, Ireland lived under the weight of the penal laws. British laws that weren't just rules. They were weapons of spiritual warfare against the Catholic Irish people. Imagine a world where you can't build a visible stone church, celebrate Mass in public, educate your children in your faith, own valuable land or horses, vote or hold public office, not even carry weapons to defend themselves. Irish Catholics were pushed into the shadows. Priests celebrated Mass hidden in rocks in the middle of the forests, the famous Mass Rocks. Families built hiding places in the walls of their houses, called priest holes, to protect fugitive priests and sacred objects. The Irish Catholic Church not only survived underground, it flourished in silence, fueled by a faith that no law could extinguish. And it was in this context of brutal repression that our cathedral was born. Because when you forbid someone to build a church, sometimes they build a cathedral. In 1730, at the height of the penal laws, something extraordinary happened in Cork. The local Catholic community, led by Bishop Matthew McKenna, took a decision that would change the spiritual landscape of the city forever. They were going to build a church, not a discreet chapel, but a real cathedral dedicated to St. Mary, Mother of Jesus, and St. Anne, Mother of Mary. Two women who symbolized divine motherhood and the continuity of the faith through the generations. But here's what makes this story even more impressive. This cathedral wasn't built by kings, nobles, or famous architects. It was literally built by the hands of the people of Cork. Catholic bricklayers, carpenters, simple labourers, men and women who worked during the day at their trades and at night, in secret, carried stones and mortar to build their temple. Every brick laid there was an act of faith and rebellion. Every column erected was a silent declaration, "You can forbid us, but you can't stop us." And there was an even deeper symbolism in the choice of materials. Many of the stones used in the construction came from old Catholic churches that had been destroyed during the Protestant Reformation. It was as if history itself was being reborn, brick by brick, prayer by prayer. The first Catholic church on this site was consecrated discreetly, away from the eyes of the British government, but its very existence was a monumental victory. In 1808, something historic happened. Cork's modest church was officially elevated to cathedral status, becoming the seat of the Diocese of Cork. The cathedral was dedicated in 1808 in the early neo-Gothic revival style and built mainly of sandstone. This wasn't just a religious event, it was a political and cultural milestone. For the first time in over a century, Irish Catholics had an official cathedral, a visible symbol of their faith that could no longer be ignored or hidden. But the story had only just begun. Fate had in store a trial by fire, literally, to test the resilience of this community. In the early hours of one day in 1820, the exact date has been lost in history, but it is believed to have been in August. Cork awoke to the smell of smoke and the eerie glow of flames cutting through the darkness. The Cathedral of St. Mary and St. Anne was on fire. The building had been extensively damaged by an act of arson in 1820. The flames devoured the main nave like a hungry beast. The wooden roof collapsed in a cascade of sparks and embers. The internal elements, patiently carved by decades of devotion, were reduced to ashes in a matter of hours. The old tower, simpler than the current one, couldn't withstand the intense heat and partially collapsed, scattering rubble across the churchyard. The archives of the diocese, precious documents that told the story of the Catholic resistance in Cork, were lost forever. Ancient liturgical objects, some secretly brought from Europe during the persecutions, turned to dust. But what really happened that night? The official causes point to two possibilities. The first, an accident involving candles or oil lamps, which were common at the time. The second is more disturbing. Many believe it was an act of arson, a deliberate action by anti-religious forces who still saw the cathedral as an affront to Protestant rule. The use of the word arson in historical records suggests that it wasn't a simple accident. But here's what the arsonists, if they existed, didn't expect: the reaction of the people of Cork. Instead of despair, there was determination. Instead of defeat, there was rebirth. Because sometimes you need something to be completely destroyed so that it can rise again even stronger. Before we continue with this incredible story of rebirth, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. The rebuilding of the cathedral wasn't just a religious project. It was a work of architectural art that would change the landscape of Cork forever. And the man behind this transformation was someone truly special. George Richard Payne was an apprentice of the famous London architect John Nash, and together with his brother James, they were Gothic revival architects who had been apprenticed to the famous Regency British architect John Nash. George Richard Payne undertook the restoration of the cathedral, enlarging the sanctuary and creating a choir arch. The cathedral reopened in 1828, but Payne didn't just rebuild, he completely reimagined the cathedral. G.R. Payne's work has been described as one of the country's finest examples of a Floridian Gothic style of architecture. The new tower that Payne designed wasn't just taller, it was an architectural statement. Built with alternating red and white stone, it instantly became a visual landmark of Cork. At night, when lit up, it seems to float over the city like a spiritual beacon. Payne enlarged the sanctuary, created the majestic choir arch that dominates the interior, and designed a system of windows that allowed natural light to bathe the altar in golden hues during the day. Every detail was thought out to create not just a religious space, but a transcendental experience. And here's a detail that always thrills me. Throughout the reconstruction, which lasted 8 years, the cathedral never stopped working completely. Masses were celebrated outdoors, in the courtyard, under the open sky. The community came together amidst the rubble and the construction work, proving that faith doesn't need walls to exist. Today, when you enter the Cathedral of St. Mary and St. Anne, you are walking through layers of architectural history that span almost 3 centuries. The interior is a symphony of stone and light. The central nave rises on clear stone columns that seem to sprout from the ground like petrified trees. The vaulted ceiling in the English style creates a sense of infinity, as if the space extends beyond what the eye can see. But it is in the baptistry that we find one of the cathedral's most striking features. The spiral floor isn't just decorative, it's deeply symbolic. It represents the spiritual journey towards the center of faith, each circular step bringing us closer to the divine. The 1996 renovation under the vision of architect Richard Hurley brought the sanctuary into the body of the cathedral and placed the congregation around three sides of the altar. This change revolutionized the liturgical experience, creating an intimacy between celebrant and faithful that breaks with the more formal tradition of the old cathedrals. The marble circle around the baptismal font symbolizes spiritual renewal, an eternal cycle of spiritual death and rebirth that echoes the cathedral's own history. The colorful stained glass windows are works of art in themselves. Some say that if you look closely, you can find subtle elements reminiscent of the flames of the 1820 fire. Stylized tongues of flame on the edges of the glass, like a silent reminder of the tragedy that gave rise to today's beauty. The main organ, often used in religious masses and concerts, has such perfect acoustics that every note seems to echo directly from heaven. But a cathedral with such an intense history inevitably attracts other kinds of stories. Legends that are passed down from generation to generation among Cork's oldest parishioners. The first legend speaks of the light that never went out. For decades, residents of Shandon have reported a faint, persistent light inside the cathedral in the early hours of the morning, even when the building was completely closed and empty. It wasn't electric light, it was something older, more mysterious. Some described it as a spiritual candle, impossible to extinguish, which represented the unanswered prayers and intentions left by the faithful over the centuries. The second legend is even more intriguing. Old parishioners talk about the recurring figure of a priest in a black cassock who walks along the sides of the church or appears at the back of the sacristy. The most fascinating thing is that he never frightens anyone. On the contrary, his presence is described as comforting, protective. Many believe it to be the spirit of a priest who died during the fire of 1820 and who still continues to look after his church. In the 1930s and 1940s, there were frequent reports of bells ringing briefly in the early hours of the morning, even without anyone in the tower. Some tried to explain it away as wind or mechanical failure, but superstitious locals saw it as a spiritual warning, or a call to pray for forgotten souls. During the renovations, human remains were discovered buried under the floor of the nave, probably priests or important faithful from times gone by. The lack of records has fueled rumors that the cathedral houses tombs without names, secrets buried literally under the feet of the faithful. Many report that certain areas, especially near the baptistry, have an inexplicably lower temperature on certain nights. Today, the Cathedral of St. Mary and St. Anne remains much more than a historical monument. As the seat of the Diocese of Cork and Ross, it is the beating heart of Catholic life in the region. Major liturgical celebrations such as Confirmation, Corpus Christi and Holy Week turn the cathedral into a center of faith that brings thousands of people together. Daily masses, weddings, baptisms, and community events keep its stones alive with prayer and celebration. The cathedral has also become a local pilgrimage point. Many of the faithful include a visit here as part of their spiritual routes through the historic neighborhood of Shandon. A touching tradition. Every August, the cathedral holds a special mass to commemorate the fire of 1820. Not as a tragedy, but as a celebration of rebirth. It's a reminder that even from the deepest ashes, faith can flourish again. The Cathedral of St. Mary and St. Anne is much more than stone, mortar, and colourful stained glass. It is a living testament to the human capacity to transform persecution into resistance, tragedy into beauty, and destruction into rebirth. In every column that pain has raised from the ashes, we see the architectural genius that can spring from necessity. In every light that passes through its stained glass windows, we feel the faith of generations who refused to be silenced. In every prayer whispered in its pews, we hear the echo of centuries of hope that no law has been able to extinguish. Bells that rang without hands, a light that never went out, a silent priest who still guards his home. Truth or imagination? The fact is that some churches carry more than history in their walls. They carry soul. If you're visiting Cork, this cathedral deserves much more than a quick visit. It deserves a moment of silence to contemplate the spiritual power that these stones radiate, to contemplate how faith can survive any storm. Like the video, subscribe to the channel and switch on notifications, because every week we have a new story waiting to be discovered. Until the next sacred route, may it always lead you to the light.